Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to today's episode of the Niche Cast. And I won't lie, pretty excited for this podcast. A lot of cool Aotearoa sporting stuff is happening. Obviously, the magic of the Blackcaps Test victory in Christchurch, Ross Taylor taking the final wicket. That's why we're going to start the show, and we'll be spinning plenty of Blackcaps yarns like Ross Taylor. I don't think he actually spun a delivery out of his 3 deliveries, but we're spinning yarns like Ross Taylor is spinning his spinny deliveries. We've got Steven Adams isn't playing for Memphis at the moment, but Steven Adams and Memphis Grizzlies are on fire, and that's one of the biggest Kiwi sports yarns happening over the festive period, the summer block god season. And we also have the swashbuckling news yesterday-ish. Wednesday, recording this on Thursday, that Chris Wood is joining Newcastle United. So those will be our big topics to discuss in today's podcast, and we'll just let the other stuff flow. Whether it's the Wellington Phoenix and New Zealand Breakers, not a whole, amazing, drastically interesting stuff is happening there. We got domestic cricket rolling on. And again, those are... We'll see if those pop up in our discussions, but we'll stick to those big 3 topics and enjoy the fuck out of those. Big up to, we got some new patrons. So we haven't done podcasts over these last few weeks, and we haven't done a Patreon podcast, but we will be swinging it back around, regular scheduled programming next week. And that means a Patreon podcast on either Monday or Tuesday. So I'll put a post for our Patreon whānau to get their questions, comments, queries, and ideas for that podcast. And big it up to our new patrons. We got Bams and Emily Stitchberry joining the Patreon whānau. So shout out to them, and shout out to all our Patreon whānau who support our content. And if you're listening to this and you want to support the Niche Case and the Niche Cast and our mission to broadcast Aotearoa sporting excellence, join the Patreon whānau. Patreon.com/El Niche Case, EL Niche Case. Every Monday and Friday, we also deliver an email banger via Substack, thenichecase.substack.com. And that's a great way to get all the Niche Case content straight to your email inbox. So if you're off Facebook, if you're not using social media, just check your email every Monday and Friday evening, and all the Niche Case shit goes straight to you directly up the guts, running it straight, and extra yarns. So a little taster here. Something that I'm thinking about for tomorrow's email, Friday's email, is just updating some New Zealand Warriors junior business, because a lad by the name of Jeremiah RC played for the New Zealand Warriors SG ball team, the famed SG ball team, the excellent 2020 SG ball team. And he played for the Warriors SG ball team while he was playing first 15 rugby for St. Peter's College in Auckland. He has signed for the Highlanders. So I'm just going to be updating that and updating some New Zealand Warriors junior business. So those are extra yarns that you can get in the email. Any ideas what you're doing in the email tomorrow, Wildcard?
Yeah, 4 words: Flying Kiwis transfer tracker. I'm just going to start doing that every single email, among other things. There'll be other little stories to chuck in as well. But I find in, like, because I did one on the last 2 emails ago, did one last email, definitely going to do more this email with stuff ramping up. It's I'm just finding, like, because the Flying Kiwis article itself is very good for, like, that's where I put, like, actual stuff, I don't want to write all the rumors in there, but the email, Flying Kiwis transfer tracker, stock full of rumors and speculation and all those things, and just kind of like deciphering it, because that stuff gets real murky real fast. So definitely got some Joe Bell in there this week. Probably write a full article on Chris Wood, so that won't necessarily be there. But MLS draft was on, and there was one New Zealander involved who didn't get drafted because those draft things are stupid. But a few other things on Marco Stamenic is back training with FC Copenhagen during their winter break. So there's a few things that'll be in there.
So that's all in the email. Niche Case content straight to email, as well as extra content, thenichecase.substack.com. And we do a pretty good job, as explored there by the Wildcard, of finding a balance between the Niche Case blog and extra stuff in the email. So between the two, You get a fair representation of Aotearoa sporting excellence. And of course, we're always writing about Aotearoa sports at the niche-case.com. Some stuff that we've got live over the last few days. We've got the Blackcaps test review. I did 5 key things. The wildcard wrote about the wahine in the NWSL, as well as Flying Kiwis. And then there's the Wellington Phoenix update as well. There are some domestic cricket yarns. I wrote about Rachin Ravindra, and there's plenty of other stuff there as well. So check out the niche-case.com. That's the bread and butter. Extra content on the email, extra content via Patreon. And let's crack into the show, Wildcard. No, that's a tongue twister. No Novak Djokovic chat round here. None of that bullshit. None of the stuff that actually, who gives a fuck about that?
You mean we're not going to talk about Boris Johnson either?
Nah, none of that, geezer. None of the bullshit. We are here for Aotearoa sporting excellence. So I'm sure you can go to stuff.com.nz, whatever it is. I'm sure you can go to New Zealand Herald for the Djokovic updates and all that bullcaca. We are here for the actual substance and excellence of Aotearoa sport. Wildcard, can you please kick off the show with a dose of mindfulness for myself and our beautiful listeners?
Yeah, a nice hefty dose here. I've got like one of them little, what do you call it? Like a fable, I guess, the paragraphs worth of a fable. Just crack straight into it without the thing. A Zen master was having tea with 2 of his students when he suddenly tossed his fan to one of them, saying, "What's this?" The student opened it and fanned himself. "Not bad," was his comment. "Now you," he went on, passing it to the other student, who at once closed the fan, scratched his neck with it. This done, he opened it again, placed a piece of cake on it, and offered it to the master. This was considered even better, for when there are no names, the world is no longer classified in limits and bounds.
So the second guy used the fan for non-fan purposes because he could see that it wasn't that the fan, or in this instance, the thing, didn't necessarily have a name. So he stepped outside his realm of understanding and used it for different purposes, thus opening it up to an infinite world of possibilities. That's fucking great interpretation there, if I might say so myself.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty spot on. Yeah, like you just as soon as you call it a fan, it's a fan. Like it has a purpose. You fan yourself with it. You blow some push some air towards your face or whatever you want to do. Of course, this is like we're talking those old timey like fold out paper fan thingies here. As soon as you don't call it a fan, it can be whatever you want it to be, right? Like without the language, which in this case like becomes limiting. As soon as you put a label on it, it becomes a thing within those labels. Like it's like 4 walls surrounding it. If you don't put a label on it, it's whatever you want it to be, or probably more importantly, whatever you need it to be. And if you got an itch on the back of your neck, scratch it with the fan. It's no longer, just scratch it with that thing that's over there. It's not a fan, it's just that thing.
Can I take this deeper into the mangroves? If you have pain, or if you have trauma or fear, by like labeling it as pain, you're already creating some negative connotations to what it is that you're aware of.
Yeah, you're setting the parameters of your experience, I guess.
Exactly. So whether that pain is like fuck, my calf muscle, pulled my calf, whatever, or like, oh, I got hit by a hockey ball on my shin, or I got a studs up tackle in the knee, now my knee's fucked. You're aware of that pain, or whether your pain is like heartbreak, whether your pain is like some trans kundalini energy in your gut rising up, or whether you've got a headache. By labeling it as a pain, you are restricting, as you've illuminated, you are restricting what that thing could be. So I don't know what the advice is, but it's just an awareness of like, that's how easy you can flip things around in your head. You say, instead of maybe, because we got to try to get to practical advice here, and it's like, through your mindfulness, through your meditation, and through your awareness and understanding, you become super aware of these things. But then if you're super aware of something and you label it, that's when that's like a boss in a video game that you've got to overcome. And I think the next level is to be aware of it and just be aware of it for what it is without labeling it as pain per se. Like, it's just something that you're aware of and it has no negative or positive flow on effect. Because I think there's some mind tricks there as well, where it's like, I'm aware of that pain. It's pain. So now it hurts more because it's pain. Instead of being like,
focus on it, and
instead of being like, I'm just aware of that. I don't know what it is. And I'm aware of something there. It is what it is. Cool. That's it. You just, through that awareness, you kind of overcome it maybe. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah. And well, it's not a solution, but I guess the result of that is not to name it something else. So don't trick yourself into saying pain is good. Like it's not anything. It just is. Like that's I always, whenever I try to like describe Zen type ideas, it always just comes back to like, it is what it is. It's one of those generic sports people things. Like, someone loses after match interview. How are you guys going to get out of this funk that your team is in? It's like, well, it is what it is. We're going to work hard, back to the drawing board, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's used as such a cliche, but then also it is kind of the perfect phrase in a funny way. A lot of I've been reading that quote that I used there. That paragraph comes from Alan Watts' book called The Way of Zen, which I've been reading, and I keep like I could go off in about 6 different tangents here. I might when I find the next couple of weeks of these mindfulness things littered with stuff I've picked up from there. But yeah, like the labeling things in general, the one tangent I'll use is the idea of labeling things in general seems to be because the whole Zen idea is like natural mind. It's not like processing things and then go, because every time you process things, you remove it one layer, you know what I mean? And by adding language to it, that's one example of how you can do that. And then thinking about the words is another, like you're moving yourself further and further back from, like with each possible step like that, you move yourself further away from natural mind, which is just like see, act, would not even see, like it's all one process. It's not like see, comprehend, think, react, act on top of react, whatever. It's just, it's a difficult concept to explain, because by explaining it, I'm doing exactly the thing I'm not supposed to do. I think the best way to describe Zen is, and I keep thinking about this, is reading that book is just like Kane Williamson when he's batting. He's not looking at the ball and thinking, I need to charge down the wicket to this. I need to he's not thinking and processing the delivery as he faces it. It's just every ball on its merits, playing like just going through the what do you call it? Like the muscle memory of the different shots that he has in his arsenal. But he's not thinking like, I need to look for the cut shot here. It's just like the ball is there for a cut shot and he's already playing the cut shot. It's not, you don't have that like process of considering and the process of processing. Like that's, just the more I read about that, the more I think like the way Kane Williamson bats is kind of the ideal metaphor for this whole thing.
I think there are many examples in sport of how mindfulness is applied in a sporting context that people don't necessarily view as in a mindfulness concept, because you can get into stuff like control what you can control. Well, that's the epitome of mindfulness, right? Like, and that's
dealing
a big
with
thing
pressure
and stuff like that. But we'll save that yarn for another day, because we've got better things to talk about here. All of my thoughts are pretty clear, and I've got pretty clear vibe on what I'm going to discuss here, but I'm going to drop one key thing and then I'll throw it over to you with regards to the end of the Blackcaps test in Hagley Oval. Blackcaps defeated Bangladesh, bounced back after losing to Bangladesh in Tauranga. Ross Taylor took the final wicket. Wildcard, and this was the only wicket of spin bowling for the Blackcaps in the series. So Trent Boult, Kyle Jamieson, Tim Southey, and Neil Wagner, they combined for 30 of the 32 wickets taken by the Aotearoa bowlers. Daryl Mitchell took one wicket. Ross Taylor took 1 wicket. So first we've got the seamers took 30 out of 32 wickets. So business as usual there. Of course, would have preferred if they got 40 wickets as opposed to 32 wickets. So that's like we can't necessarily compare that to previous series where the Blackcaps take every single wicket in a series and the seamers take the bulk of those wickets. Like those seamers didn't take 8 wickets, and that was the reason, why they lost that first test. So that's a thing there. But I just find it hilarious that Ross Taylor was the only spin bowler to take a wicket for the Blackcaps in the series. How did you process that final couple of hours for the Blackcaps and Ross Taylor? Because I found everything from... I'll just stop there. How did you find that whole situation? I mean, it was a casual Tuesday afternoon, not much was doing, and then it just exploded with cricketing fucking magic.
Yeah, I like when sports has that, like the romantic aspects to it, and definitely just like even beyond that, just when it's like fun and exciting. And something Brendan McCullum talked about a lot in the thing when they were having a big argument about overrates, and he was talking about like Craig McMillan was just having a moan about there's no reason why they can't get the overs in during the day, blah blah blah. And McCullum was sort of talking about how it's a little bit more about entertainment value and things like this, and it's boring when it's slow or whatever. But then also I'm sitting there at home thinking, like, you don't go to a day of test cricket and then go home and be like, I was shortchanged because they only bowled 85 overs and I wanted 90. Like you're going home thinking about what were the big moments that I saw. Like Lytton Das getting 100 would have been one if you were there that day. Like that's the thing you go home thinking about, and you're like, that was a treat. I experienced that. That was great. You don't care about the overs that were
wait, hold on. So hold on. You just, because you brought up the fan thing, and like literally as Craig McMillan was explaining that, I was like, I put myself in because I just think the overrate stuff is completely overblown. Like,
if you get a result in the test match, then who cares, right? You got enough overs in.
But the thing that everyone complains about is fans.
Yeah, fans being ripped off or whatever.
Yeah, and that's always the go-to argument. And as soon as I put myself in a fan's shoes, like a fan attending the game, at no stage have I ever bought a ticket for test cricket expecting 90 overs in a day. That has never been part of my decision making, and I doubt it's part of any other fan's decision making.
Yeah.
Yet it is the sole main reason why commentators, because I don't hear fans complaining about, oh, we didn't get 90 overs today when they're watching at home.
Fans wouldn't know if no one else brought it up.
I don't think fans give a shit, but the people who give a shit are the commentators who refer to the fans giving a shit. It makes no sense. And I think right here, right now, we can both make our stand. We do not give a shit about overrates. Yeah. I think the ICC, they've got their punishments, they've got their systems. That's cool. Those are the boundaries, the rules and regulations that we all operate in with Test cricket. That's fine. That's what it is.
And it was docked points from Australia for a slow overrate in one of their test matches last World Test Championship that cost them the chance to play in the final instead of us.
Yeah, so those are the rules.
Nice.
Those are all the rules and regulations, but we can't pretend like we give a shit. And Macca...
if the rules and regulations are in place, there are punishments. That's enough, right?
Exactly. But on top of that, slow overrates have no effect on fans. So don't suggest that fans are the people disappointed, because we're not. We don't give a shit. Because as you said, you go to watch live sport for the moments. You're not sitting there with because, shout out to the cricket fans who go to test cricket and they go with their little scorebook and they roll through and there's that element of cricket. Even those dudes aren't keeping track of the fucking overrate. They don't even give a shit. And they're the biggest cricket nerds that there are. People go to these live sporting events to see, as you said, Lytton Das smack a nice century, to see Ross Taylor win a test for Aotearoa with his final delivery and all that shit. Like, please, if you're listening to this, stop caring about slow over rates, and please think to yourself, do I expect 90 overs every day when I go to buy my ticket for test cricket? Because that is very strange. But let's get back to the Magic.
Yeah, the Magic. Where do I start with the Magic? Yeah, so I like I watch whether I'm at a game or whether I'm watching on TV. Like, I'm watching for those big moments for sure. Like, I'm aware of this about myself, and I like lean into these things. So when they're getting like, I was conflicted because they got to the point about sort of, I don't know, it's like 75 overs, about 2 wickets left, and they're cheering "Bowl Ross Taylor, Bowl Ross Taylor, Bowl Ross Taylor," while you've got Kyle Jamieson with 3 wickets at one end and Neil Wagner with 3 wickets at the other end, 2 wickets left. So it's sort of like, well, I don't know, there's a 5 front offer for one of the like fast bowlers in the team. You kind of, there is a little like there's room for sentimentality, but there's also like there's you know, got to be fair to the dudes whose job it is to get these wickets in the first place.
But those dudes don't give a shit about their 5 wickets.
Well, I mean, once Jamieson got one of them, Wagner couldn't get 5. So I don't think he cared anymore. Yeah, but then does Jamieson,
would Jamieson rather have 5 wickets or Ross Taylor take the last wicket?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because it was Tim Southey by accounts, who was the dude who was leading the chase, being like, "Oh, Ross Taylor, yeah, go on, do it, Tom, do it, go on." And then Tom Latham said afterwards that the 2 most this is a test where he scored like 250. So the 2 most pressurized experiences he had through the whole test was realizing that the crowd is begging for him to bowl Ross Taylor and thinking, "Oh, I might have to do this." I was being like, I can't disappoint them, and then also being the dude under the high ball that got the, you know, taking a pretty good catch for the wicket there. He took some ripper catches throughout that whole test match. Tom Latham, his fielding was nuts, and they kept going on and on about like who's going to be the next first slip after Ross Taylor. It's like, how is it not Tom Latham? Like, what's the conversation you're having where you're thinking someone else should be higher in the hierarchy than him? No idea. But especially when you've got dudes like Southey and Mitchell, who and Conway as well would be in the mix, who would all be like excellent second, third. Southey has been an excellent third slip for, like, you know, a lot of stretch of his career. So that was an unnecessary conversation, I felt.
Stick to the Magic. Stick to the Magic. Let's keep the Magic fun.
As to the Magic, like, it definitely... So, like, at first I'm thinking, like, you got to let the fast ballers do their thing. But then when you get close to the new ball and it's come, like, you know, last over before it, should we maybe bowl a spin just for a change up before thing? Like, it got to the point where it's like, okay, they've had their chance now. It's Ross Taylor's turn. You can't not bowl him. I think that just sort of, I think Tom Latham realized that. I think the other dudes on the field, Ross Taylor realized that. He started playing up to the crowd a little bit, pretending to roll the arm over. It just sort of became a thing that, like, coalesced in that way. Like, everyone sort of came to this realization that it was just this fateful thing that was going to happen. Is Ross Taylor's going to bowl this the 79th, well, this, I guess it's the 80th over. He's going to bowl this over, and he's probably going to get the last wicket, which led to that amazing stat of Ibadot Hussain being the last man to dismiss Ross Taylor, and also the last man to be dismissed by Ross Taylor in Test cricket. Both of those things at once. That's incredible. And yeah, it just, at some point, like the first 2 balls, he rushed through them. He didn't, you know, like you said, he wasn't really spinning the ball or anything like that, but he was just darting them down, throwing some darts. It felt inevitable that like a tail ender isn't going to be able to restrain themselves from having a swing. And he was probably going to, you know, if you bowled him, he was likely to get the wicket. It was just a fun experience. And I think culminating in that wicket, one of those great, like, not just a great moment within that day or within that test, I think a great Blackcaps Test cricket moment, full stop. Like Ross Taylor getting a wicket with his, you know, getting the final wicket of his Test career, getting it himself. That is probably one of those things that I would imagine anyone who saw it, certainly anyone who was there in the crowd, despite the fact that it meant they missed out on a few extra overs in the day, which, as we chuck that off the ticket price. anyone who was there to witness that was going to remember that the rest of their lives, like big cricket fans. You know, I think it's just a special Blackcaps moment. And you know, those are the things. Again, not overrates, but those things, those big special moments are the things that people like. That's what makes sports and following a sports team and being a supporter and things like that. That's what makes those things so special. So I've just kind of been bathing in that afterglow ever since.
As always, I have to get far more magical.
Please, by all means.
Like we can go as far back as saying that Ross Taylor's averaged under 35 in each of the last 3 years of Test cricket. And in the last 5 years, 4 of those 5 years, he's averaged less than 35, which is definitely the worst patch of Ross Taylor's career in Test match batting. So that's kind of the wider history at play here. Then we come into the more recent events, and I found Ross Taylor to be extremely fidgety and nervous in every interview I saw of him. He just looked very nervous, and every little moment I saw him, he didn't look. And maybe this is just because there were more interviews, and maybe that's just Ross Taylor's natural personality. Is that when you get?
Are you saying this is after he announced his retirement, or are you saying leading up to that announcement as well?
No, from the announcement onwards.
Right. Yep.
He like all his interviews, he was very fidgety and just like straight up looks like someone who was nervous. Then we come into the Test series, and it's all about Ross Taylor batting. And for many of us, that came like there was a nice vibe to it. We were like, oh, this is one of the last times we'll see Ross Taylor bat. That's cool. And he's a legend. That's cool. Also, Ross Taylor didn't score many runs in the series. So there was a bit of sadness there that Ross Taylor batted 3 times. He scored 99 runs with a high score of 40. And to be honest, his batting innings looked like his interviews. Extreme, like I've consistently said, for some reason, especially more recently, Ross Taylor looks very fidgety, starting his innings. Like it's just how he bats. Like he doesn't really look comfortable in the first over or so of his Test innings. And he just like finds a way to get through that patch, and then his best innings, all the shots and whatever. But not only did he not score many runs, he scored the runs he did score were also extremely nervous and fidgety. And there was like, we didn't get that moment with the bat. And so there was a bit of sadness there, right? Like, yes, it was fantastic and nice. Like the guard of honor as he came to the crease, like that was all like a lovely vibe, but that was packaged along with the fact that he wasn't getting runs. So there's a bit of sadness there, like, oh, we don't get the fairy tale that we wanted with Ross Taylor batting. Like, oh, that's a bit of a bummer. All of which is to say there was something greater that was being worked towards. And that him bowling, like, when you think like 4 of the last 5 years, he has averaged under 35. And basically every second year of his Test career, he's averaged over 50. Just for some context here. So it's like there's a wider slow burn up until his retirement. People are talking. Ross Taylor's not scoring many runs. We got the Stephen Conway dude. Like there's a bit of that chat happening. And then we come into the series and he's announcing his retirement. And after he announces his retirement, we don't get the runs that we want for the epic moment. Little did we know throughout this whole time, the climax was going to be Ross Taylor bowling. And that is absolutely fucking ridiculous. And I can look back throughout the series and I can just see it all clearly where Ross Taylor wasn't meant to score runs in this Test series. He was meant to hijack the final moment as a celebration of who he is and what he meant to Aotearoa cricket. And I'll throw this one at you, Wildcard. We've seen a lot, like we've seen some Blackcaps retirements, and we've seen other retirements. I don't want to mention names, especially in the cricket realm. Like, I don't want to compare retirements. Outside of cricket, this one, it felt a bit more like a Benji Marshall type of retirement, but it was amplified and to so much higher levels because of the magic of the moment and being in Aotearoa, being at Christchurch and all that stuff. Like, it was a far greater moment than Benji Marshall retiring, but to me, it kind of felt the same. And the reaction, to me, it just felt like Ross Taylor meant something more to fans than other cricketers. And I don't, like, of course, there's a whole bunch of things that we can throw up as reason why, but when you just see like a lot of the reaction of the players, when you see a lot of the reaction of the public in both Tauranga and Christchurch, the wider cricketing community as well, it was interesting. Maybe it was interesting to see how much Ross Taylor meant to the public and his teammates. When we think about other great cricketers who have retired, I didn't necessarily get the same vibe that those cricketers were like loved in that same way, if you catch my drift here. Like, yes, there's other cricketers who have retired and they've done great things, and it was a celebration of their cricketing careers, but I don't necessarily think that the public loved them. I don't think that those cricketers actually meant something emotional or, heartfelt to the public. Ross Taylor, clearly, how this all played out, because the cricketing gods were on his side, so obviously the cricketing gods love him, and the public reaction, it was so clear, and it kind of hammered home just how much Ross Taylor meant to the Aotearoa public, the sporting public, and the cricketing public as well.
And Bangladeshi cricket apparently as well. They all loved him too. And like, there's also, there's tributes from, if you just follow the stuff online, there's tributes from all over the place. Like, the last one I saw, for example, was VVS Lakshman doing a big old tweet spiel thing. So like, it definitely transcended. I'm just trying to think, because obviously he's in the all-time great category. So when you're talking about someone like that, there will be it's a big deal when someone like that retires, and I guess also, I don't know, there's I think there's two. Well, I guess we'll chuck out the obvious one as well, being like a Polynesian cricketer as well has been a rarity, a little bit of a I don't know about trailblazer. There've been, there's plenty others, but to achieve what he had, definitely he is like a bit of a he's a beacon for that community as well. He's someone who I think the way that he played cricket is probably a big reason to that as well, because he's someone who could grind out just a absolutely incredible grueling 290 at Perth, and he's also someone who could score like a one-day 100 off 75 balls or something like that, with just like 3 or 4 massive slog sweeps, and the kind of things that appeal to the full spectrum of cricket fans. Like that, there's crossover appeal there as well. And then also, I just think he's a cool personality that a lot of people have really enjoyed watching, and he plays the game with a smile and the right way and all these kind of things. He hasn't really he's been on the wrong end of a few like weird selection things and the captaincy drama once upon a time, obviously. But he is a dude who hasn't really, he's not come out and upset anyone with him. Like everyone, you can tell his teammates love him. And probably that stuff made him even more sympathetic to fans as well. And then I think one other aspect, because there's like this, it's this whole like mix of everything that made this such a big moment. Because like, yeah, it's circumstance as well. Like Daniel Vettori could have got something similar, but he didn't want to tell anyone he was retiring. Just sort of like disappeared after the World Cup final, wasn't it? I think people knew he was going to retire, but he wasn't going to do the big announcement and anything like that. Ross Taylor, just by circumstance, was kind of in the position where he had to. Like because of the way that the tours have to be structured so far ahead now and squads to be picked, and there's already that conflict about like in order to play those ODIs in Australia, he has to not play the test against South Africa, which means that these are his last test match, etc., etc. And also, I think he probably is someone who wanted that kind of experience as much as anything, because it meant his family and his friends and stuff could have that for themselves to see that. And I like, if you've been to a cricket game, see the Blackcaps play over the last 15 years, you'll know there's always a section of the crowd where there's just like 50 Ross Taylor shirts, you know, like he's always got a big supporting thing from the wider whānau and all that. Like, but I think also the other aspect to chuck in about why Ross Taylor has that sort of crossover appeal is I think the timing of his career when he started was at that time where the Blackcaps would have 2 or 3 really good players and they would lose more games than they win. And they were fun to support, but they were also like, I don't know, a little bit of a defeatist attitude about them sometimes. It's like you have that feeling that, oh, well, the third innings, they're going to collapse, or they won't be able to bowl Australia out in the, twice in a test match or something like that. They would, as I said, like they would lose more than they would win. We know what this journey has been like. And now he's retiring at a point where he's like a world test champion. He's played in he's played in the last, I'm pretty sure Ross Taylor is the only player, in fact, who has played 4 ODI World Cup semi-finals in a row. And he's played the last 2, because New Zealand's the only team who's played in the last 4. And I would say he's the only one who was there in, what are we doing here? 2007, 11, 15, 19, I think, right? He would be the only one who played in 2007 who's still there in 2019. The span of his career has been the span of the Blackcaps going from that sort of like plucky underdog, going from just like a fun team that loses a lot of games to getting into that plucky underdog status to punching above their weight status to like actual world test champions, made the final of each of the last 3 major tournaments. That like we speak a lot of these are unprecedented times for New Zealand cricket, and Ross Taylor's career has kind of been the arc of that of the Blackcaps going from that team to this team, you know what I mean? And I think that probably also, I got to imagine that also plays a big part, because that, I mean, for 2 reasons. One, because of that sort of like psychic reason that I was mentioning there, of this like the parallel, the parallels. But then also because as the team gets good, he's one of the players that made them good. You know, he provided so many of those great moments, big centuries and incredible innings and things like that. Like that itself leaves indelible memories. So all of those things combined, I think, leads into why this was probably more special than pretty much any Blackcaps retirement of recent times. Like, I mean, BJ Watling is absolutely beloved within the Blackcaps as well, on a similar level. And people who watch a lot of Test cricket adore that dude. But he only played Test cricket. You know, he didn't do it in ODIs as well, 2020s as well. The type of player that he was a middle order, arrest the collapse, come and grind out, slow strike rate sort of thing. It's not the same. Let's use that phrase again. Like, they're not the same crossover appeal that Ross Taylor had in all formats, and with the style and the variety of how he would play, all those kind of things. Which is nothing against BJ Watling, nothing against Dan Vettori or Brendan McCullum or other players who have had similar kind of, players with similar impacts who've retired as well. It's just a point about, again, how special Ross Taylor's career was. And he's still got 6 more ODIs, doesn't he?
I would say he's the most loved Blackcap ever. And
I think the only player in our time that could compete with that is Kane Williamson. And A, he's still playing, so isn't really applied to this conversation. And B, it's a different kind of
Well, so let me
iteration.
frame that this way. Like Ross Taylor is Kane Williamson's consigliere. In the Mafia, you have the boss, and then he has an offsider who is usually an elder who, steers them in the right direction. That's Ross Taylor. And Kane Williamson's incredibly lovable, like Brendan McCullum was incredibly lovable. Yeah, BJ Watling's incredibly lovable, but I don't think it's ridiculous to say Ross Taylor is the most beloved New Zealand cricketer ever. And that smacked us in the face with the magic that happened. Like, people connect to him, for whatever reason, as you outlined there, for whatever reason, people connect to Ross Taylor. And that was on display. And it was kind of like a beautiful thing. And you mentioned the ODIs. I believe he's still going to play a lot of cricket. Maybe I'm missing something, but I've watched his press conferences and all that. He never said he's stopping playing cricket. And I wrote about this in the immediate aftermath, but it presents a pretty funky little period where Ross Taylor can play a lot of cricket for Central Districts. And Ross Taylor's he specifically mentioned T20 leagues and county cricket in his retirement press conference. So he's like, if Central Districts want me, I'll be playing for them, and there'll be 20 T20 leagues around the world and whatnot, and county cricket. So if he's mentioning those things, I think he still wants to play a lot of cricket in those kind of realms. And for me, as someone who makes content about New Zealand cricket, who writes about New Zealand cricket, podcasts about New Zealand cricket, as a pure New Zealand cricket fan, if you're like me and you love New Zealand cricket, you might go down and catch Ross Taylor playing in Queenstown for Central Districts in the Plunket Shield. There's those opportunities, let alone the Kiwi County Tour this winter. If he's playing in county cricket, I am solely writing about Ross Taylor. And I might just do that in general. As soon as those ODIs are finished, and again, I might be missing something. I'm not too sure. I don't want to go all in on this bucket if he's just going to be I'll finish this season with Central Districts and then we'll call it time. So it's just kind of got to let some water go under the bridge there. But if Ross Taylor's going to play another year, another 2 years of cricket, I'm doing a fucking Ross Taylor tracker. And I'm following him throughout these twilight years. It might be called the Ross Taylor Twilight Tracker. And I'll track his performances, whether it's with Central Districts, whether it's in county championship, which, we've already got the Kiwi County Tour stuff there, or the T20 leagues. I'm excited about that. So it's kind of I don't know, whether it's the run scoring stuff that led up to him having his moment as a bowler, or all the bullshit, because we're talking about what makes Ross Taylor, I believe, the most beloved, the most loved New Zealand cricketer ever. Part of that is all the bullshit that had to come, right?
Yeah.
And now we're in a stage where all that bullshit and all that other stuff, it kind of leads us to a point where we may have the twilight phase of Ross Taylor's cricketing career outside the Blackcaps where he has the most fun. And it might be where I have the most fun covering that, if you catch my drift. And I think that's kind of the underrated thing, because it was kind of step by step. It's Ross Taylor's retiring from Test cricket. And the undercover thing is, we've still got a couple of ODIs. And then undercover thing of those things is he still wants to play cricket. And I don't know, this is a half-baked seed type of thing. If Ross Taylor's still scoring a shitload of runs, and his shitload of runs is a key trend, a key theme in my Twilight tracker, and some Blackcap stuff doesn't go quite right, that's going to be a very interesting dynamic where Ross Taylor's because Ross Taylor got shafted from the T20 team. And then if Ross Taylor goes and plays in every T20 league around the world and he fucking dominates them all, how fun is that going to be? That's going to be awesome. And it's kind of I just have to pause because the immediate word that came to mind was revenge. And I don't want it to be about revenge. I want it to be about Ross Taylor having the most fun that he can be. But a byproduct of that might be a big old, just fuck you. Just a bit of a fuck you to like the people who push them out. So that's a factor. I believe Ross Taylor still wants to play cricket. He still wants to play a lot of cricket. I believe, because I don't think people can I think it's hard for people to understand like how much pressure playing in the national setup like comes with. Like you've seen it with Usman Khawaja. As soon as Usman Khawaja like released the Australian national team stuff, and because I've like, he's one of my favorite Australian cricketers, Khawaja. And you see him and he's doing like YouTube content. And I saw that he like moved up to Queensland a few years ago. As soon as he released the Australian national team stuff, he looked like a happy, fun, vibrant dude who was just loving life, playing for Queensland, scoring runs, doing what he loves to do. When you're playing for the national team, there's a lot of pressure that comes with it. And if you're an athlete, if you're a sports person, part of a team, think about how that one coach didn't like you and he made you come off the bench. And then you went over there and like you progressed up your, leagues or levels, whatever it was. And then suddenly the premier coach loves you, but then a new coach comes in, he hates you and you're not playing. And then you're like, oh, should we change clubs? What's doing here? All that shit applies to the Blackcaps as well. And it applies to like, first class
any
cricket.
international team. Yeah.
Yeah. It applies to the more professional you get in sport, the more present that stuff is, where coaches and high performance staff, their mission statement, their mission is to make decisions solely based on the best thing for the team. And that includes a lot of opinion. And then the player becomes the victim of opinion. And again, we've all felt this at a grassroots level where the coach hates you or the selectors hate you, whatever it is. All that bullshit comes the most in this context when you're playing for the Blackcaps. Think about the
plays
dudes
out in the media and everyone else is talking about it. It's not just something you get to privately deal with your grassroots coach. And I guess also you don't have the option of just changing clubs, do you? You're stuck. Like you've reached the top. Like it's a thing that angles up towards the peak. It's once you get there, there's no sideways movement. You can only go down.
So imagine you're Colin Munro. Colin Munro just plays cricket and he scores runs. And then at some point he's kicked out or shafted out of the T20 team. Now,
not entirely unreasonably either.
Yeah, but like the thing you got to do here is put yourself in the mind of Colin Munro.
Yeah.
Because that's the bullshit you got to deal with. Or maybe you're Ish Sodhi and you're in the UAE and you're Aotearoa's best T20 spinner and you get told you're not going to play the first game in spinning conditions. Again, mindfulness here, that is out of your control, but that is the bullshit you have to deal with as a professional athlete. And I say all of that stuff to say Ross Taylor is loved because of the bullshit. Well, not because of, in part, due to the bullshit he had to endure throughout his career. And I think there's going to be a clear differentiating marker between the end of his like Blackcaps career. Of course, love playing for Aotearoa, love representing Aotearoa, love everything that comes with it, but it also the release of maybe playing cricket without all that bullshit. Because when Ross Taylor's going to play for Central Districts, he's going to be having a fucking fun time. He's going to be loving, he's going to be traveling around Aotearoa, might be able to bring the family with him. He's going to be playing just with his local CD lads, like Will Young's here over my shoulder. And I was a keen observer of how Will Young reacted to Ross Taylor's wicket, because Will Young was the batting prodigy after Ross Taylor at CD. And you could see that Will Young like absolutely loves Ross Taylor. So if you put Ross Taylor back in that CD environment, Happy as Larry. He's going to be loving cricket. And then he gets to go like T20 leagues around the world. He might go to county cricket, fuck around there as well. Like, I think he's going to have a lot of fun and a lot of like a weight off your shoulders type of situation. And I just want to make it clear, like, this is still available to us as cricket fans, assuming my reading of the tea leaves is correct.
Yeah, hopefully, because that will be fantastic. Like, as much as anything, it's just having another, like, another tributary off the river. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the Blackcaps don't have to be the be all and end all of Kiwi cricket. It's fun there. It's the main river. This is the one that leads out to the ocean. But also there's just it's just one other extra cool thing that we get to follow along and enjoy and whatever, along with the domestic scene and the various other players. Colin Munro doing his little thing and a mini Ross Taylor at the moment. Of course, all the White Ferns and stuff is not as enjoyable as the Blackcaps have been in recent years, but maybe they'll turn a corner come World Cup time. Yeah, it's what you want. It's a variety is the spice of life. Many different branches to this Kiwi cricket and tree. Is there other stuff we should talk about from their test match as well? I don't know.
Well,
I can't remember any now.
A succinct way of saying it is like the most loved New Zealand cricketer now has autonomy, and just like there's going to be a lightness, fun, a vibrancy with him as well. No, the thing I was going to say was that New Zealand, there is a clear avenue to track New Zealand's most loved cricketer during this next phase, which I'm excited about. I find that really fun. Yes, and there was a cricket game happening prior to that.
Tom Latham went good.
Devon Conway continues to go well. Will Young continues to go well. They were the only New Zealand batsmen to score over 100 runs in the Test series, and they are the top 3 batsmen, so that's pretty cool. Mentioned the seamers taking 30 out of 32 wickets in the series. Good thing in that Hagley Oval Test was just different dudes getting wickets in both innings. Like, I didn't really some greatness happened. You had the Bolt taking 300 wickets, Latham getting back to business. But if we're talking about the test match, it all went to script. Apart from the Ross Taylor, the Ross Taylor magic went to the magical script designed by the cricketing gods for him.
Yeah, it's a rewrite on the usual script, but it was a necessary rewrite.
It was, but the Blackcaps performance went to script. Like, I wrote in my 5 things after the loss in Tauranga. It was like, first thing, credit Bangladesh. Second thing, Bay Oval pitch. Third thing, don't overreact. Well, guess what? They go to Hagley and they fucking wipe the floor with them. So I guess my takeaway is that we definitely have to have a far greater understanding of what the Bay Oval pitch is and what it does. Because after the first test, that was already the vibe I had, was this is the most Bangladeshi conditions in Aotearoa. No surprise, Bangladesh won that test. No surprise, but funnily enough, Bangladesh won that test. Hagley Oval, it's an Aotearoa fucking pitch, Aotearoa conditions, and New Zealand wiped the floor. So it does set up their World Test Championship stuff is getting a bit precarious, just with what's happening there. But the Hagley Oval stuff was just pure New Zealand in Aotearoa. And that's so the World Test Championship. Let me just get up the ladder here. The Blackcaps, I don't know, but they've got what happened in India. They
draw in a loss,
and then a loss and a win in Aotearoa here. So it's far from smooth sailing in the World Test Championship. And we've next got South Africa, who I wrote that they have 3 seamers under the age of 27 who average under 23. And that's Rabada, Ngidi and this new dude, Marco Jansen, who's a fucking freaky left armer. Like, I don't know where South Africa get all these seamers from, but they're fucking ridiculous. Not to mention Dwayne Oliver, who's just come back into the mix. Fantastic nibbler of a ball as well. So that series is going to be difficult for Aotearoa in Aotearoa as well. But yeah, what were your main takeaways from that test? For me, it was just a case of business as usual for New Zealand. And another reminder just to like, because Chris Cairns has had a bit of a glow up after his,
hasn't he? Eh?
Fucking goes from like being one of the
persona non grata,
and then he has like his stroke or heart attack, whatever, and now he's got like a fucking column for New Zealand Herald that thankfully is
really?
Locked away under premium. So, because I just saw the headline like things the Blackcaps need to improve on by Chris Cairns, and it was under the premium. It's like, bro, like this is just one of the things that like the New Zealand media threw up, like who's in danger from the Blackcaps after that first test. And it's like, don't overreact. Like it was what it was, and now they just smoked Bangladesh in the most Kiwi conditions. So who are you going to drop now? What's going to happen? You know, like fuck all that. Who cares? They righted the ship.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that South African series because they've got the bones. They already had the bones of a half decent team, and they sort of just didn't quite have the stock players around them or a couple of superstar players to lift them above. You know, not really coping with a couple of the retirements, especially in the batting thing. You know, guys like Amler and Quinton de Kock now is on that thing as well, isn't he? Also retiring from Test cricket, but and Faf and etc. But you know, this Peterson dude looks good for them. Top order, they got a great opening stand. They've got this rotation of great bowlers coming through. The Jansen dude is, freak's a good word for him. These guys, especially because a lot of them are young as well. Probably, I mean, the narrative that would have been for that Test series is that South Africa were the last visiting team to win in Aotearoa, but that's no longer the case because Bangladesh went and did it a couple of weeks before they were going to turn up. So maybe spoiled that little narrative a little bit, but like a lot of these guys might not have been there in 2017, or if they were, it would have been their first tour to these shores. So I think it's quite a nice time to be playing this South African team when they're sort of getting back onto the rise. It'll be quite a nice test for probably both teams. Nice couple tests, nice tests, these couple tests. So that's cool. I heard Devon Conway on the radio the other day, yesterday, in fact, and they asked him, like, it was on an RNZ thing, so it's not exactly like the deep dive Blackcaps cricketing analysis or anything like that, but they just said, like, what did you guys change? The question, what did you guys change from the first test to the second test to get such a, drastically better result? And Devon Conway was like, because he's quite like a lot of these Blackcaps guys, he's quite a, soft-spoken dude. He doesn't necessarily come out in big blustering tones. You can imagine what like one of the Aussie cricketers might have said in a similar thing, and big old thing of like passionate team talk type answer. But Devon Conway was just like, nothing. And like, that's probably not an answer that's going to satisfy a lot of people, but it's kind of true. Like, what did they change? Nothing. They just did what they were supposed to be doing, but they did it better this time. They didn't change anything. They just did the same stuff with improvements. Because I still think like that first test is drastically different if Will Young doesn't get run out at the point that he does, and then they just didn't quite get another, like, Henry Nicholls scored some runs at 5 in that first innings in the first test, but they didn't quite get another massive roll on like they had with the platform that Conway and Young set. Here they did. Here they had, like, first of all, they had a massive opening partnership between Latham and Young. Then Young gets out, and then Latham and Conway have a massive partnership. And when Ross Taylor got out, it was like 420 for 3 or something like that. Like, even when Ross Taylor came to the crease, you knew it was going to be his last ever test innings at that point, because the Blackcaps weren't going to have to bat again if they were like piling on this many runs. And they arguably also didn't take it as far as they could have, but they also, they took it far enough. In excess of 500, they enough to win by an innings. It was good. Because they capitalized on a good start, which they didn't do in the first test. And it sort of feels like that was a one of those like crossroads moments where this time they went towards the sunny rainbow side, and last time they went towards like the dark and dead tree side. Like the games, that first test, I still think could have been very different if they hadn't let Bangladesh get on top at the point when they did. Which is probably a couple wickets late in day one, and then definitely chipping away on day two, and then them also having a good batting thing and getting a lead. And like that was, and we talked about this last time, all massive credit to Bangladesh, because normally foreign teams in these conditions cannot sustain over. In fact, it's not even about these conditions. It's just in general, Test cricket is one of the most difficult sports like out there, because over 5 days, all those little like could go this way, could go that way moments tend to balance out to where the better team almost always wins. Upsets are actually quite rare in Test cricket, especially away from home. So that was just enormous credit to Bangladesh for getting on top and somehow sustaining that throughout. This time the Blackcaps got on top early on and sustained that throughout. Like it's kind of the same thing, just a couple of little things that might have, like, I don't know, they were just a little bit more ruthless this time and piling on the runs when they needed to, rather than maybe just like going through the motions a bit too much and letting themselves fall short of the kind of score that they should have got, and then like realizing that this team they're playing were not the easy beats that they have been in the past. And like you really need to pile on the pressure in order to capitalize on those things. You can't. It's not enough just to be on top. You need to then, like, when you're on top, that's the time to strike. Didn't do that in the first one. Did do that in the second one, and you got like massive, like vast chasms between the two results. But as Devon Conway said in that radio chat, I don't know that there was a whole lot different from the Blackcaps in terms of like how they approached that, what they were trying to do. I just think they were a little bit better, a little bit more ruthless. And then over 5 days, that compounds to where you get a massive innings victory.
Well, over 3 days.
Over 3 days in this case, yes.
So it's funny, you go the super like molecular microscopic angle where like these key moments in the Tauranga test, that's why they lost that test, and these small moments in Christchurch, that's how they won the test. Me, I'm the opposite. I'm super duper big picture, where it's Tauranga was conditions that were foreign to the Blackcaps and Aotearoa. Christchurch was conditions that are favourable and they know a lot about in Aotearoa. And that's where you got the two different results. So we've just got a different perspective of those things, because
it's sort of the same thing. If you
yeah, but that's your
like when you take a circle, you go all the way around a circle, 0 degrees and 360 degrees is the same thing. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of if you zoom in far enough, you just end up back where you started. I don't know how that works, but
yeah, I just don't like personally. I don't like in sports where it's like, so you keep mentioning the Will Young run out. Yeah, that could have gone either way, but it fucking happened. It is what it is.
Well, it's not just that he got out. It's also that the guys after him didn't like.
Yeah, but I think that is all I think that's all a product of the conditions.
Yeah,
and how the conditions impacted decision making, how the conditions took away from this, played into that. And I think there's just a stark contrast between what happened in Tauranga and the Bay Oval. But again, we might be just circling around the same thing there. So fantastic result. What's next for Aotearoa cricket? We've got we've got the Super Smash games tomorrow, and that rolls back around. We have this thing where the ODI team to tour Australia won't feature any test players because of the overlap with the travel and stuff like that. So you get the Ross Taylor situation where he gets to go to Australia and play ODIs against Australia with like his mates. Guppy's going to be there. These are all these other dudes who are like outside the test group are going to be playing in that ODI team.
You reckon Ross Taylor will captain that team? Because Tom Latham will be playing test, Kane Williamson will be playing test, Tim Southey will be playing test.
Yeah,
I think Mitchell Santner did captain the 2020 game not that long ago, didn't he? So he'll be in that ODI team. So there are one or two other options, but
yeah, there's plenty of options there. So that's just and who makes that ODI squad is going to be interesting as well. So that's exciting. Yeah. And then we've got the Netherlands ODIs. So you're going to have Logan van Beek and Max O'Dowd, Auckland cricketer. They will be playing for Netherlands against Aotearoa as well. So, and then we've got the South African Test Series as well. So interesting, fun period for Aotearoa cricket coming up. Well, we're in the depths of it right now.
Well, not to mention Women's World Cup as well, isn't it? And
yeah, it's a bit later.
I think that's still 2 or 3 months away, isn't it? It's very late summer. Yeah.
Still got Super Smash, Hurley Burton Johnston Shield,
of course.
Let's go Steven Adams and the Memphis Grizzlies. You would have seen a headline on any one of your favorite mainstream media outlets that Steven Adams, he's out of action. He's in the COVID protocols. You might not have heard that Steven Adams and the Memphis Grizzlies are fucking dominating the NBA. With Steven Adams, the Grizzlies had a 7-game win streak. And that has continued without Steven Adams, and it's gone to a 10-game win streak after they defeated the Golden State Warriors. You've done a couple big yarns, a lot about rebounding and Steven Adams' role for the Memphis Grizzlies. And just to keep a container around this Steven Adams discussion, I got some questions here, Wildcard, to just help us discuss it and help the listener and audience understand some Steven Adams and Memphis Grizzlies details.
Fire away.
What is Steven Adams's role for the Memphis Grizzlies?
Well, he's the starting center. He starts alongside Jaren Jackson Jr., who plays power forward, who's one of their big, star players. But by being like pairing, like Jaren Jackson Jr.'s had to play a lot of center while Adams has been in COVID protocols the last 3 games. And he sort of said in one of them afterwards, but he's talking about like the impact of not having Adams and him having to do a lot more of the rebounding and some of like matching up against the biggest guy on the other team. And he's like, man, it just made me appreciate him so much more. And like, that's the kind of stuff that he's there to do. There's the stuff that makes people appreciate him by like, we don't want to have to do those jobs. And also like he's in a very young team. So there's a lot of guys who are still learning how to do those things. And he's leading by example in that way. He's there to rebound for sure, to not just to like get the rebounds himself, but also to box out and just make sure the team gets the rebound in general. Defensively, generally that's what he tries to do, is let's take out the if there's someone trying to get the offensive rebound for the other team, he'll take that dude out, and who cares who gets the ball otherwise, as long as it's one of our guys. When they're on attack, he's not necessarily like, he gets the ball a lot, and there's sort of like these those kind of like high post up type scenarios and a lot of handoffs and things, and from there it's like flip the ball to a like a guy running off of you, or like firing in those bounce passes of his to cutters towards the basket, but he's not going to turn and shoot from those scenarios. Pick and roll, lots of screens, lots and lots of screens, especially since Ja Morant came back, just screens for days. All those kind of things that he's been doing throughout his NBA career. The Memphis Grizzlies didn't sign him to be a player that he's not. They didn't sign him to be like, right, start shooting 3-pointers. They signed him to be the dude he always has been, but just like to the max, because now he's in a role which actually really nicely suits that. He's got great 3-point shooters around him, dynamic guards who can beat their dudes off the dribble. You see a lot of him, like, when he used to play with Russell Westbrook, it would be a lot of sort of pick and roll stuff where Westbrook could go around the screen and Adams would cut to the basket. Westbrook would chuck up a lob, Adams would throw it down. You don't have that in Memphis. They almost never do that. What you get instead is like the guards are quicker than him to get to the hoop. Like dudes like Ja Morant and Desmond Bain and even a bit of Dylan Brooks as well. I think a lot of Adams's assists are going to Desmond Bain specifically. Like they've got a good combination with Morant. It's definitely a lot about like, it's just setting the screen and giving Morant just a little bit of a window to run, and then he's just too quick. No one can keep up with him. So Adams's role isn't to run to the hoop and try get the lob passes or anything like that. His role is to follow. He's not going to be able to keep up with them. Just follow after them, and if they miss, you clean up. He gets a lot of rebounds doing that kind of thing, offensive rebounds, and he is the best offensive rebounder in the league this season. Like he, at least before he wins the COVID protocols, missed a few games, he had the most total offensive rebounds, and I would assume that his per game average and also his overall percentage of offensive rebounds gained to opportunities for offensive rebounds gained. He was top of the league in all three of those at one point. I'd assume the percentages and averages are still top of the league. Someone like Clint Capella or someone might have overtaken him on the totals just because he's missed a couple games. But best offensive rebounder in the league this season. I don't think you can deny those numbers. There's not, and also of course he's a leader on defense who has to. A lot of drop coverage, a lot of he's not necessarily rushing out and trying to guard people, closing out shots and stuff like you got to do, but generally just trying to be in the right position defensively, and then helping other people be in the right position and calling things out. And they've got guys who are getting a lot of steals in front of them, and all you got to do is just not be in the wrong place to allow those guys to have the time to be able to do that. So all of these things, it's nothing different to what he's done in the past. There's nothing different to what he was doing in his last couple of years with Oklahoma City Thunder. It's just that it's on a really good team, which works really well. And he therefore is being very well appreciated for all these things that he can offer, because someone's got to do the dirty work, and that's what he does.
So all that dirty work, along with other, bits and pieces of a fantastic Memphis Grizzlies team, has the Memphis Grizzlies in the playoff picture, rooted in the playoff picture,
home advantage playoff picture.
Home, yeah. So that's fantastic. I also believe it's fantastic because, as we've explored, when the NRL finals come around, game gets a whole lot fucking tighter. I vividly remember us talking about some of those NRL playoff finals games where it's 8-6, it's 12-10. Yeah. It's far tighter games, far more physical, far more brutal, far quicker, and the whole game changes. And I think you can apply that to a lot of other sports. Just anytime final sports roll around, the type of game changes, and that happens in the NBA. And so we've seen that, where you got to be better on defense, you got to be far tighter and all that stuff. Also in the NBA, there is a move away from the big man, but to win in the playoffs, you're going to need a big man, because you're going to have to have the troops for the matchup. And if you're coming up against Jokic in the playoffs, you're going to need a fucking big man. If you're coming up against Giannis, you're going to need a fucking big man. If you're coming up against the Lakers suck, but if you're coming up against Anthony Davis, you got to have a big man, right? Somehow the best teams.
Rudy Gobert is a likely guy they might face in the playoffs as well,
Exactly. Even if you're coming up against the Warriors, they still have Draymond Green. They still have Looney, who are big men who play their role. And that is to say that even though the NBA, the style of basketball has changed drastically, A, when you get into the finals, the game tightens up. And B, there's still big men that you need to match up against. So you just explained Steven Adams' role for the Memphis Grizzlies now as one of the hottest teams in the NBA, and they are rooted in the playoffs. What kind of scope do you see, or what are you thinking about with Steven Adams as a member of the Grizzlies in the playoffs? Because this question's interesting to me because I fucking love it. I think obviously Steven Adams, his style, being a Kiwi, cruises under the radar. Ja Morant's the superstar. Desmond Bane's on fire. Jaren Jackson Jr. is like a, freaky young talent. Like there's a lot of great things happening with the Grizzlies that Steven Adams falls under the radar. Come playoffs time, Steven Adams is going to be one of the most important players in that team, I believe. How are you thinking about like the forecasting his role in the playoffs?
I think again, it's very similar. They're not going to ask him to do anything different than what he's been doing. It's just, as you say, playoff time in most sports, especially when you get to like, like the top of the pops type stuff. It tightens up, and the margin for error is so slim. So it's not just about like, can you do this stuff? It's can you do it almost every single time, like no possessions off, no slipping up. One thing with Adams in the past is that he's had this is around the time December, January, where he normally peaks in his seasons. Afterwards, after that point, like he's normally picked up enough like bumps and bruises that he's starting to deal with a few niggly injuries, and it catches up with him a little bit, and he loses some steam towards like playoff time. And this has happened in a couple of those Thunder seasons. He looks as fit and fresh as he has for a while at this point. So I don't know if that's necessarily because the other thing is like, because he's also been like held out of a couple of those OKC playoff series is he would be like sitting out entire fourth quarters and not being used and whatever. And that sort of plays into that idea of like your big man in the playoffs. You don't necessarily like that. You just don't use them as much. I tend to lean a lot more towards what you were saying, especially because since that time, since like the post Durant OKC with Adams and Westbrook, that little like 3 or 4 year window that they had, even just since then, you've seen, and specifically from overseas players as well, guys like Jokic and Gobert and Antetokounmpo and guys like that, there has been like a little bit of a resurgence from big men, and they're very skilled dudes. Like Jokic is the most incredible passer. Like you watch him just get the ball on like the top of the key and just like big hands, just ping, hit like a pass that bisects 2 or 3 defenders and then right into the right in the breadbasket for a shooter on the other side of the court. Like he does things like that every game. He's unreal. There's a reason. It's not, these aren't just guys who do the Tristan Thompson thing that he used to do when the Cavs were good with LeBron, with just like one guy who gets all the rebounds. Like Andre Drummond's career is a bit of an example of that. Like the dude who just gets all the rebounds doesn't survive. But Adams is like career high assists right now. He is a more just because he's not a scorer doesn't mean he's not a highly skilled big man who can like do a variety of things. He's definitely got that. And I think the funny thing is there was a quote I had in the last Kiwi Steve thing about one of the assistant coaches for Memphis talking about how other coaches always mention Steven Adams to him. Like it's not necessarily the guy you see, like he's not the guy you see mentioned in the headlines or anything like that. Obviously, you're going to focus on Ja Morant. You're going to focus on like Desmond Bane's most improved player campaign and Jaren Jackson Jr. and things like that. You focus on those guys for sure, like guys that were drafted by the franchise. But coaches are definitely noticing what Steven Adams is doing. And then when they played the Lakers, like in the wake of that quote, when they played the Lakers, Frank Vogel mentioned Steven Adams by name as someone who like I can't remember what the context was, but it was something about like him not playing means this, and this. Like he wasn't even playing in the game and he was still getting shout outs from an opposition coach. Like this stuff doesn't go unnoticed. And like, I suspect, when you get to playoff time, some of the struggles he's had in the playoffs in those last couple of years with the Thunder, I don't think are unrelated from the fact that the Thunder were getting rolled in like first rounds every single time. They were a team that was really good. winning regular season games because they played hard every single time and they just didn't have that extra level to go to in the playoffs, and other teams did, and they got found out. I don't see that as being an issue for this Memphis team. They had a playoff run last year. Like they had to go through the I think they knocked the Warriors out, didn't they, in the play-in game or something like that. And then didn't go, like they lost in the first round, I think, but it was sort of like I think they might have even lost to Utah. I can't remember. Pre Steven Adams days. Like they had a playoff experience. It wasn't necessarily a great one. They were a young team. They were still a couple pieces away. Steven Adams was probably one of those pieces. Desmond Bain hadn't had, like, that was him as a rookie. This is him now doing crazy things. It wasn't quite there yet, but those are formative experiences for a young team. And so I think it's easy to look at it from a Steven Adams perspective and being like, this is the first year. It's not. This is like at least the second year of this team being, like, really the third year, because you want to look at it from like, when did Ja Morant come into the league and join this team? That's the trajectory that they're on. He's hopped this train a couple of stations down the line, you know? So I think, and just the other thing that I think adds to this idea that they can be a genuine playoff team. They're not just going to crumble when things get to the big time. Is they're beating all the best teams at the moment. They just beat the Warriors. This is after Klay Thompson has come back as well. This is like full strength Warriors. They just beat them. They've won something like I think, I can't remember what the stat was, but I saw it on one of their like team account things. There was a tweet like they've won, I think, 15 games against the top 8 teams in the league or something along those lines, like against other teams in and around. They're not just beating all the teams below them, they're beating everyone at the moment. They're beating these teams that they're going to be playing in the like come playoff time, you know. So that is a good sign of a legitimate team who is like, whose record doesn't flatter them. So I see good reasons why all those things should translate into the playoffs. And if they do, then Steven Adams' role stays the same, but his, you know, the same, but in the playoffs is also kind of not the same. It's ramped up and then still keeping that consistency. That's the real deal.
The like one thing I've heard about this team, the Memphis team, is that they all love each other. Like a lot of them are super young.
Seems legit, yeah.
A lot of them are young, but their parents, like, they hang out together, they like each other, they enjoy each other's company. And you mentioned like year 3 of Ja Morant and stuff like that, like, and then you've got the year-on-year jump. So like Desmond Bain improving from last year, Ja Morant, like everyone improving from last year.
Jaren Jackson's healthy this year. He wasn't last year. It's another one.
Like all that stuff's there, but also Komatu or Steven Adams comes in, and he's a veteran. Like, it wasn't so long ago, I have vivid memory of this. I'm watching Steven Adams in, you know, playoffs basketball in his first few years with the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I think the underrated, slept on thing that isn't covered a lot is you have Memphis Grizzlies added a veteran good dude to their team, and that only helps the environment. That only helps the culture. And that's where you're seeing the team go to a next level, I believe, is that, like, you bring in Steven Adams, and Steven Adams might be telling these young dudes, like, you guys are fucking good, like that type of stuff. And he just fits in seamlessly. Like, he's not a dick. He's a good dude. He's a Kiwi and all that shit. Like, he is there spreading out the Kiwi sports culture in a team and an organization that already has those things starting out, like the seeds, the kefir, the yoga culture is already being, you know, developed. The mother has already been developed. Then you throw Steven Adams in, that's like extra yeast. That's extra bacteria into the culture, and it keeps on developing. So if you're not already tapped in, tap into Steven Adams and the Memphis Grizzlies. Is there a date for his return to the team?
Well, he was questionable for their last game, which is an upgrade on being out. So I would imagine he's a good chance of playing whenever they play next, probably tomorrow. I'd imagine their next game will be on Friday, something like that. There's a point you said there as well that I hadn't thought about so specifically, because there's a thing about like him being, I think he's the oldest guy on the roster. Him and Kyle Slow-Mo Anderson, but I think Anderson's a couple, either like a year or a few months younger than Adams. It's probably the first time Oh, maybe the last year in OKC, I'm not sure, but otherwise, like one of the first times where that's probably been the case for him, being like the older guy on the roster. But he is obviously a dude who's like wise beyond his years. He has that kind of personality, and the right kind of like coachable personality as well, which then translates well into being able to help others to do the same thing, because he's been through all these issues and talked them through with, you know, all his various past experiences. But the point I like that's an I suppose like an obvious thing that people would have said, just looking at the thing and being like, well, he's the oldest guy in the roster. He's been around several years. He can help these guys in that way. What I hadn't thought about that you just sort of triggered is like, it's not just that in general. It's also from a like the very start of like, because he joined a really good team. He joined a team that had already made the NBA Finals a year or two before he arrived. They then traded James Harden, and then from that trade, one of the picks they got was the one that became Steven Adams. A bit of NBA folklore, but he in his very early days was playing playoff basketball, like throughout all those early seasons. I think last year might have been the first year in his career he didn't play playoffs. Actually, I have to check that, the Pelicans season. So it's not just that he's a veteran, it's that he's also a playoff veteran. It's like the last few years in OKC weren't great, beaten in the first round pretty much every single, well, it was every single time after Durant left. But that last year that Durant was there, Western Conference Finals, Game 7, that's his playoff atmosphere as it gets. Like he was on the wrong end in Game 6 of Klay Thompson's like legendary performance where he just like shot the lights out. That in itself is an aspect to that signing that I hadn't thought about to that extent, but I'd imagine that only becomes more critical now as we like get deeper into the season. Of he's also made deep playoff runs. Like that's a really specific way in which he can be a leader and a veteran on this team as well. It's like he's been there, done that before. He's played with Westbrook, Durant, played against the Golden State Warriors when they were the best team on the planet. Which they might be again right now, who knows? But they just Memphis just beat them most recently. So like that aspect of Adams is, I guess, tutelage in Memphis as well as a one not to be slept on.
Yeah, just imagine if you're like Memphis Grizzlies players and you're 22, 23 years old, and Steven Adams comes in and he tells you that you remind him of the Oklahoma City Thunder when they were a young team going to like competing for NBA championships. That's a rocket up your ass. Like that's a motivating force. That is something like that is a seal of approval for you to go harder and harder. And they've got an attitude. Like they were ripping into LeBron, getting into his head. Like they're a niggly little team. And I think that might stem from just an understanding of who they are. And like you can't credit Steven Adams for all of that, but maybe Steven Adams giving them some belief and them like, you guys remind me of this. That might be a bit of petrol or solar power. One last thing here, wildcard. Chris Wood has made a big move from Burnley to Newcastle United, and like just some housekeeping here. The figure that's reported, 20 million.
Sounds like 25. It might be 25 million pounds.
25 million. That is the transfer fee paid by Newcastle United to Burnley.
Yes, triggering the release clause. Apparently, well, it must be like if they say it's a release clause, and Burnley have no reason to want to sell their top. He's not the top scorer of the season, but he is their top striker. To a relegation rival when there's likely only to be one of the two of them that survives.
But call your jets. We're going to spin the out. So for how this works for people who don't follow football, Chris Wood has a contract and a salary with Burnley. Newcastle United paid Burnley 25 million to release Chris Wood from that contract. Quick question, is that an automatic? Like if you come to me and you're like, here's 25 million, is that automatically out of the contract, or is there like an agreement?
Well, that's where we're getting at with the release clause. Ordinarily, that would have to be Like you got to go like club to club in order to get permission to negotiate with the player. That's where the fee comes in, to find that agreement. This case, there appears to have been a release clause, so that's why there was an automatic thing. Burnley had no choice but to accept a fee above a certain point because it's in his contract that they have to do that. Which gets us into this idea of I remember saying at the end of last season that Burnley, because Chris Wood finished last season in hot form, he's not been at his best this season, but neither has the team. I just see that as sort of symptomatic of the guys around him as well. He's missed a few chances. He could have done better for sure, but he ended last season on a hot streak, and I just thought 2 years to go on his contract, this is the time you start negotiating a new one. Maybe didn't happen. Turns out there was a release clause that they could have potentially gotten rid of if they'd offered him another contract on improved terms, which they didn't do. And I sort of see this as like, don't think Burnley have been the best managed club off the field in terms of like transfer and contracty stuff. And this is not the case because there's about 8 guys in their current first team who are coming off contract at the end of this season. And in Premier League football, that is just not heard of, especially for some of their best players like England international James Tarkowski, their centre back. Like, you just don't let guys like that get into the last year of their contract. It's not done. And Burnley have something like 8 guys in their squad. And Chris Wood wasn't one of them, but he does have a release clause, which has allowed Newcastle to come swooping.
So Newcastle pay Burnley for the release. Does that then... So in NBA, if you trade a player, the contract goes with the player. And the contract stays with the player.
Yeah.
So Chris Wood so Newcastle pay Burnley. They're not, this 25 million, 20 million, it's not Chris Wood's money. It's Burnley's money. They pocket that money. Does Chris Wood go to Newcastle with the same contract, or does he get released and then negotiate a contract with Newcastle?
No, yeah, he will sign a new contract with Newcastle. The Burnley one is voided basically once he's transferred. Like once they sell the player from one club to the next, the contract doesn't follow. I think there's some like technicality with NBA stuff where that is the case, where the contract carries on. All American sports really, where they're sort of like, in effect, they're contracted to the league. And the team sort of owns the rights to that contract, and that's why they can trade the contract back and forth. Football, it's like that contract is between Chris Wood and Burnley Football Club. So when that one's done, he signs a new one with Newcastle, which could be happening as we speak.
And in theory, so Newcastle, for those who don't know, Newcastle have got a whole lot of money come in to back them, new ownership. Loosely similar to the Manchester City situation, where people from a certain region of the world chuck a whole lot of money in to own the club, and then they just throw money around to build out their club, commonly known as sports washing. Yeah. Chris Wood, so that sports washing money has 25. That's how you get the 25 million to pay Burnley. In theory, Chris Wood's going to get a bigger deal with Newcastle as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, his salary is going to certainly be, especially because like Burnley are renowned as being probably the cheapest team in the Premier League over the last few years. Like they've done very well because they're such a well-coached team with like a distinct vision of how they want to play. Like they're consistent in that. Because of that, they've been able to stick around in the Premier League with teams that have much more money to spend. But I think it has maybe caught up with them a little bit this season. I wrote something even before there was ever links with Chris Wood leaving them about in one of the emails a week or two ago about this kind of idea. And it's, you sell one of your first 11 players to a relegation rival. I don't think that boosts your chances of staying up.
So now let's get into the football aspect. So for Chris Wood, he's getting a bigger contract. Burnley get their transfer fee release thing. Happy days. Football perspective, Chris, so you've mentioned a few times there, Chris Wood is moving from one team in the relegation zone to another team in the relegation zone. Is that So you've had your Burnley Football Club cap on for a bit there. Chuck your Chris Wood cap on. Moving from Burnley to Newcastle, ignore the money, the financial aspect of the deal. How do you perceive the football move from Burnley to Newcastle? Obviously, with the type of player Chris Wood is, it's going to be the same role. Like, he is what he is as a footballer. It's not one of these situations where, like other sports, a player's going to go here and do this role, or they're going to, develop into this player with greater opportunity here. Chris Wood is a starting striker, and he was a starting striker at Burnley. Newcastle are paying him, in theory, to be a starting striker for Newcastle. Although we know sports teams and sports ownerships gets a bit weird, so you might splash the money on Chris Wood and never fucking play him. That's a complete possibility here as well, given the mayhem of the world. How do you perceive the football move for Chris Wood as far as like opportunity, goal scoring, stability of the team? Because when I think of Newcastle, I think of shit show. That's the only thing I know about Newcastle United, other than Alan Shearer.
I thought you were going to say Alan Shearer, so you did bring it around at the end.
Yeah, I got there. Like I do have.
What about Nobby Solano?
I do have some football now in this noggin. Like, I do remember Alan Shearer. Yeah, shout out Newcastle stalwart.
Stephen Taylor, even better. Yeah. Also, shit show. For some reason, like, I just have that association with Newcastle United and shit show. Like, they have just always been in the shit show type of news stuff. And they're probably the club in the Premier League that has spent the most time in the shit show news, because if you're in the shit show news, high chance you're going to be relegated. Then you're out of the Premier League. So you're not in the Premier League shit show news cycle. Newcastle do well to stay in the Premier League, so they stay in the shit show news cycle. That's about the breadth and depth of my Newcastle United expertise. All of which is they have been relegated a couple of times over the last sort of 15 years.
They get back in there.
But they get back in there.
That is to say, from my perspective, Newcastle, bit of a shit show history, and moving to a bit of a shit show history type of club doesn't seem like the strongest move. What's your read on the football move for Chris Wood as far as like, his game opportunities, stability of the club, stability of the team? Because there's no difference between the clubs as far as relegation zone. Like, he's not going to a middle table club. That is like Jerry down the road can see that that's a better situation for him. This is a bit murky. It's a bit confusing when you're going from relegation zone to relegation zone, and you're like, outside of the money, what is this move about? So I'm just curious, as the Flying Kiwis expert, as probably the Chris Wood expert, the best Chris Wood expert in the whole wide world, maybe. How do you perceive Chris Wood's move on strictly from a football perspective?
Because like the release clause, Burnley had no choice but to accept the bid, like any bid that exceeds the release clause, right? But Chris Wood had every right to reject it. Like, he didn't have to he could have just said, no, I'm not interested. I like where I am at Burnley. I'm in a comfortable situation where I play every week. I usually score goals. I know my role. We've been able to stay in the Premier League every other season that we've been in these kind of dramas. So I back my team to do it again. He could have said all of those things. Perhaps he didn't back the team to stay it again. I've already said that I have been a little more skeptical than other seasons that they're going to be able to find that winning run that they normally do and be able to get out of where they are. But yeah, like he accepted the offer to go to Newcastle. Like, he's a party to this deal. He's not just being like traded against his will, like it happens in those American scenarios that we're talking about before. Why would he want to go to Newcastle? I can think of a few reasons beyond the fact that he'll get a pay rise. For one thing, especially with English football and the history of it, there is a certain glamour that comes with certain clubs, and Newcastle recent shit show status aside, they are a much bigger traditional club than Burnley Football Club. You know, like they even when they were in the Mike Ashley years pre-takeover, where he wasn't investing in the squad and only wanted to sign players that would be able to sell for a profit, and fans were furious because he just seemed like a disinterested owner, cynical businessman type. And there was so much like just negative vibes around that club. They're still packing like 50K at St. James's Park for a home game. You know, they're still getting big crowds. They're a huge club who have been a huge club for many years. And like recent struggles aside, it's still like he's going to be playing in a big, a big and famous stadium. He's going to be playing like wearing an iconic jersey as well. The Newcastle, the black and white stripes. It's a, like status wise, it's an improvement for him, even if it's to a club that's directly parallel. They're on the same amount of points with the same amount of wins, having played 2 games more. So like table wise, it's parallel at best. But when you consider that they've just had a major takeover and are now the richest club in the world, and clearly like coming out and looking to buy players right now to save them, versus Burnley, who probably didn't have the option of buying any players unless they sold someone first. In which case, that is at least the silver lining of losing Chris Wood, is that they've got £25 million to now invest into 2 or 3 other players who can hopefully help them more than one player was doing in the first place. Like maybe they'll be able to reinvest and be better, but their recent transfer success rate is absolutely awful. And that's why they're in this scenario, is because the guys that was the key players when Chris Wood signed 4 years ago are still the key players now. They're like 1 or 2 additions have really come through. It's just not enough. If you stay still in the Premier League, a club is like rich. A league is rich and like, money strewn as that one. Staying still is falling behind. You can't just like pump the brakes and be like, we're happy where we are. You've consistently got to keep evolving, and Burnley haven't done that and probably paying a little bit of the price for that. Newcastle are actually investing and trying to stay up. They have money to invest, and it's money from nefarious means if you track it all the way back. But I don't know. We'll pump the brakes on that idea for a second at least, and just keep it on the field. One team is upwardly mobile, one team is sort of static. Well, then, even though they're on the same scenario, one team does feel like a little bit more proactive about trying to stay up, and he's part of that. They've had their one reliable striker is Callum Wilson. He's currently out for 2 months with a hamstring injury. Dwight Gale is worse than Chris Wood and is also currently injured. Joe Linton wasn't doing anything as a striker and is now apparently quite a good central midfielder since they've dropped him back. Like, they really didn't have anyone else. This is part of why Chris Wood was the best option for them. They wanted a guy who can come in and be immediately successful, because whatever big plans they have down the line, like, first of all, you can't convince Neymar to come and play for Newcastle United in a relegation struggle. He's going to try win the Champions League with PSG. He wants Champions League, not championship. You're not going to get those big flashy signings. You have to progress your club up to that point where you can have actually something to offer that's better than what, or at least on par with what Barcelona, maybe not Barcelona at the moment, but Bayern Munich, PSG, Manchester City, etc., can offer those like top players. You have to get to that level. It's a process. Manchester City went through the same process when they got all cashed up. So right now, it's very short-term visions. How can we not get relegated? Because if you get relegated, you set this whole plan back at least 2 years. There's the year of trying to get promoted. There's the second year of buffer in case you don't get promoted the first time, or maybe you get back into the Premier League, but you need that year to sort of steady yourself in the Premier League again before you can start, challenging and doing stuff. You set that vision back a couple of years if you get relegated. So this is purely about, from now until the end of the season, how can Newcastle stay up? Well, what they need is not to just buy exciting prospect players who maybe won't hit the ground running. What they need is, like, just for now, proven Premier League guys who will and also they play Watford on the weekend. Like, this is a massive impetus as well, is they play the one team that's above them on the table within like 8 points of them. Like the one team that's realistically catchable at right now from outside the relegation zone, they play them on the weekend. Those are points that they can't get back if they waste them. They need to be challenging for that game. They need a transfer they can get done quickly for a player who could like be immediately ready and successful. Chris Wood, 10 plus goals in the last 4 Premier League seasons, release clause in his contract, like everything, just like he ticks every box there. Just cannot see him being a long-term option once they start to ramp things up again further down the line. I can think of no way in which that's the case. Might hang around playing off the bench for a year or two, or maybe he'll get out on loan and go somewhere else. But right now, like for the rest of the season, he has the option to come in for a team that doesn't really have another striker. They've just signed Kieran Trippier, who's another similar, also an ex-Burnley player, Premier League veteran. He's been playing with Atletico Madrid the last couple of years, England international. One of the best crosses of a football on the planet, like fantastic, especially from dead balls, but from open play as well. Fantastic crosser. With a striker who dines on good service. Like if you give him 2 or 3 chances a game, he'll score one. You give him 1 chance per game, he might miss. It might be a sitter, but he might miss it. You know, he's a little bit like that. But you can create 2, 3, 4, 5 chances for him. He's going to put a couple of them away. You get him in rhythm, get him the opportunities. Well, they've got a couple guys. Alan Saint-Maximin is another really exciting player that they have, who's just like all flash, not always bringing the cash, but all flash. He's just taken on defenders and probably beaten them 3 or 4 times more than he needs to sometimes. But he will help create things for someone like Chris Wood as well. Like he's the guy who's in there, just put the goals away. We don't care what else you do. We'll figure out next season when next season comes. But right now, it's an opportunity to be a hero and score some goals. I did see a clip as well where he was from a couple of years ago. He was asked about the players he looked up to growing up, like the strikers he'd like to model himself on, or just the guys he just his favorite players in general. And the 2 guys that he mentioned were Didier Drogba, which from what I understand, he was a Chelsea fan growing up, so that makes sense, and Alan Shearer. So, well, he's now walking in Alan Shearer's footsteps. So there you go. There's pretty much like there's some figuring out to be done at the end of the season. If they do survive, he'll probably get another year, especially if he scores goals and keeps them up. You know, it'll be a lot of goodwill to carry on from that. Don't see him necessarily being there and doing the same things in 2, 3, 4 years. But for this stage of his career, maybe things had gotten a little bit stale at Burnley. Maybe he wanted to challenge himself in a different environment. Maybe he wanted to just play for a different club in general. He played for a lot of clubs coming up, like a lot of like loans and things like that, a lot of different environments. He's been at Burnley for 4.5 years. It's the longest he's been at any club consistently without like a loan out or anything like that. So maybe he just turned 30 as well in December is another thing. Like maybe he just feels like it's time to do something else as well, another aspect of this transfer. But short term, keeping it strictly football and ignoring like the money and all that kind of thing, I actually think this is a fantastic move for him. Long term and even midterm, I think it gets sketchy, but you figure those things out when they come around in football. No contract is immovable, especially for someone like him who like worst case scenario, maybe he just becomes like the relegation threatened team like go-to loan player, or just getting Chris Wood for 6 months and score some goals if he does it, like, you know, the way like Harry Redknapp or Sam Allardyce as managers. You've last 6 months of a season battling relegation, sack your manager, bring in one of those guys just to like avoid the drop, just on reputation alone. Maybe he can be that dude as a striker, who knows? But like, just for the rest of this season at least, I'm quite excited to see what he can do with Newcastle. And I think he's in a scenario where maybe compared to what Burnley has become, and there's like a few guys out of form and not quite doing what they have been doing, maybe he's just in a place where he's going to get better service and have a more defined role, and maybe a bit more recognition as to what he's there to do and what he's not there to do. And because the thing is that I did see mentioned in an article by one of the Burnley writers, which I hadn't, like one of those things I hadn't considered. You don't really get this impression from following things from afar, but he's not, like, despite being a top scorer for this club for, you know, a couple of years running and consistently giving them goals and keeping them in the Premier League, he's not really a beloved dude amongst Burnley fans. They don't like have a chant for him on the terraces or anything like that. And I don't know. He gets a lot of criticism as well when they don't do well, just because of the style of player he is. If it's clicking, it looks good. If it's not, it looks bad. Like the nature of how he's gone to Newcastle and what he's there to do, I think it's all maybe just a little bit more defined as well. I wonder if that's played an aspect in this transfer as well. But we'll see how it goes. I'm quite excited to see how he does in a different environment now that he's sort of proved himself as a Premier League striker. Because every other club he played for pre-Burnley, it was like him trying to prove himself. He's done that now. It's like, can he translate that to a different club?
You mentioned cash and flash, and just a funky note to finish the podcast. I was thinking, like, I've never heard this one thrown up either. And I literally just thought of it now. All cash, no stash. Because you can have the cash, but if you don't have the stash, it's a similar.
You're already sold out, maybe.
Yeah.
That's an issue of supply and demand, isn't it? You need to be stocking up the shelves.
Or you need to have your stash of cash. But if you just got the cash and you got no stash, what happens if you lose your cash? Which is it's a loose thing around the substance and the razzle dazzle. All razzle dazzle, no substance. You mentioned all flash, no cash.
Yeah. And
then I think you can also,
in the case of Alan Saint-Maximin, he's all flash, some cash, but yeah.
If you're on the streets out there getting up to nefarious business, maybe just chuck out there. No, he's all cash, no stash. No, that he doesn't have any stash. He's all cash.
No forward planning. No,
exactly. No savings, no foundations. He's just got the cash. He's got some cash in his pocket, which is cool. It looks cool because you're flashing the cash around, but you don't have a stash to fall back on.
All cash, no stash.
All cash, no stash.
I'm going to write that down as an episode title.
Well, see, that's the title. It's this one. Also, I've come around to a theme, a trend. A full circle conclusion here. We got the Ross Taylor Twilight phase coming up, and I'm really excited for that. That's kind of a longer term thing. Ross Taylor's Twilight phase, right? We've talked about all this stuff, so I don't need to explain it. That's what I'm excited about with Ross Taylor, Twilight phase. Steven Adams. Playoff basketball in the NBA with Steven Adams. That's exciting. That's really exciting. And he's on a really cool team. So Steven Adams on the Memphis Grizzlies, I'd say, is similar to Ross Taylor's Twilight phase, because Ross Taylor's Twilight phase is going to be all about fun. It's going to be all about loose, light, energy, enjoying a cricket, no pressure, just him doing what he loves to do. Steven Adams on the Memphis Grizzlies, super fun, super exciting. He's representing Aotearoa to the fullest in a team, in an environment that embraces that. Chris Wood. Steven Adams and Chris Wood are a bit more short-term. Chris Wood, he has been purchased with a strict intention to avoid relegation. That's fucking exciting. I might even catch a Newcastle game every so often now. This might get me into the Premier League. This might spark up some observations, some Newcastle United observations with Chris Wood, because he has been, the purpose of him going to Newcastle is to avoid relegation. And that throws a whole new buzz around Chris Wood and what he's doing for Newcastle United. So all three of those big topics, we've got stuff to look forward to for all three of them, with their respective sports and their teams and their situations, their environments. Again, to come full circle, it's all magical. It's all magical. Do you have any final word there, Wildcat?
Well, I was really enjoying watching Newcastle United go a long way towards getting relegated after becoming the world's richest club. I just thought that was so funny. So there's a little bit of a conflicting thing here. Probably the sports washing idea is too deep of a one to chuck out as just a short aside at the end of things. But I do think you can separate that from Chris Wood trying to do his job, from a legacy club with hundreds of thousands of fans who have just like want to see their team try and do well and whatever. I think you can separate these things from like where the money's coming from, because if you trace the money back, you've watched The Wire, same as I. If you trace the money back, who knows what you're going to discover. I would suggest most football clubs in the Premier League are run by, billionaires or billionaire consortiums. I don't think there are any ethical billionaires. This isn't to say that the Newcastle ownership isn't worse, because I think they kind of clearly are. But I'm just saying it's a murky situation when you get into that, because everything is run terribly and by bad people, or that's not very Zen of me to say bad people. People who are neither good nor bad, because none of us are neither good nor bad, but actions can be bad or good. People who undertake bad actions on a regularity. None of this is nice, but it's kind of how top level professional sports operates, and I think it's just safest to save yourself from just going crazy, just to be like, well, I just want to support Chris Wood because he's like from down the road, from down State Highway 1 from where I am. I like him. He's from the same country as me, and I'm going to support what he does. And
a good bit of growth from yourself there, because I think in recent podcasts I've called you out for your mindfulness or lack of mindfulness towards. I can't remember the exact examples, but I have pulled you up on applying mindfulness to other situations, and you just did it yourself there. That's a step of growth. Referring to billionaires, you caught yourself in the mindfulness bubble, and that's a beautiful thing. And that's a beautiful way to end the podcast, putting the mindfulness into action and excitement as to how Ross Taylor, Stephen Adams, and Chris Wood roll through their next 3 to 6 months. Let's say that. Well, that's a good time period for those three. So kia kaha, stay beautiful. We'll be back with the Variety Show, Patreon podcast, and the Niche Cast next week. Full banger. Tune into the Niche Cast. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Yield.